Cold was the first thing I felt. Even before my eyes were open, I felt a very deep chill in my core. Thousand spindles of ice soon between my tissues. I blinked, my eyelids slowly beginning stealing back the darkness, and with it, the desire to keep them closed forever. I was lying face down on the floor, the tiles speckled with brown blood. I moved my arms to push myself up, but my muscles were stiff, almost too stiff to bend without breaking. I feebly pushed myself up, forcing weight upon deadened legs. I began to wonder why I felt the way I did. I wasn't sure how long I'd been laying there. There was the most peculiar feeling in my stomach, a sort of dissolution. Perhaps I ingested something that had knocked me out? Wait, where was I? I looked around the room I was in. It was a kitchen, mostly everything in order except for the few traces of a hurried exit. The back door was open, barely bolted to the top hinge. Cabinet doors were left open, and it seemed only the food readily edible was taken. A knife set was knocked over, a few blades missing. There was blood spattered all on the floor, in which I was laying. I could see a putrid steam of it running down my shirt. No. I could see a putrid stream of it running down my shirt. But after a quick search, I couldn't find nor feel any wound. Each window I saw had the blinds drawn and the lights turned off, as if the house's occupants were hiding. I went into the living room, barely bending my brittle knees until an awkward walk. It was dark, but I could see outlines of furniture well enough. There was nothing out of the ordinary except that the front door had been barricaded with a desk. There was a bedroom towards my right, the door closed, then a hallway near the front door. The entire house was dark and empty, except for me. Where was I? Whose house was this? And then I realized I didn't know who I was. I thought upon it, trying to bring up some memory of a name, a friend, an activity, my face. I'd even have a vague image of my own face, and the feeling of facelessness was eerily disconcerting. Trying to access my convoluted memory banks, I realized I couldn't remember anything other than the cold of waking up on that kitchen floor. I slowly became more and more sure that I had been poisoned, or perhaps an allergic reaction. What makes one amnesic or unconscious? Or conscious? It had to be some sort of chemical. What if I lived alone? I checked for a wallet in my pocket, but found none. I tried to call out, but something was wrong with my voice, as it felt and sounded like my vocal cords were shredded. The only thing to come out was some sort of strangled noise, mixed with phlegmatic sputter. I spat out a gob of blackish red blood caught in my throat. I couldn't taste it, but it looked disgusting on whoever owned the couch in front of me. Since no one had responded to my vocalization, I decided to leave. Going to the front door, I pulled the heavy desk aside. It was difficult, not because of the weight, but because of my limbs. My arms felt encumbered by hundreds of pounds, and the rest of my body had been struck by some sort of torpor, like it was being pulled towards a supermassive black hole in the opposite direction I tried escaping to. Trying to grip the hulking piece of furniture was difficult as my fingers wouldn't cooperate, but the desk gave way easily, more easily than I thought it would. I'm not sure how long I spent trying to open the door. Time seemed different. I couldn't tell how long a moment was, as I was completely grounded in the present. Trying to recall waking up in the kitchen was slowly becoming more difficult. After what could have been hours of failing, I orchestrated all my fingers together, twisting into a twisting motion, and opened the door. The difficulty of something seemingly simple perplexed me, but I lost interest and soon forgot about it. I had heard of concoctions that paralyzed, but they were some cause that caused memory loss as well. I knew of the Haitian zombies that forgot themselves entirely and served whatever voice they heard after they were resurrected, but there was no voice to command me. My experience wasn't quite as dramatic, but someone's blood was in that kitchen. Maybe I survived an assassination? I had been subdued on purpose, and I could still feel the result in my rigid muscles. But if amnesia was an intended side effect, what would someone stand to gain from it? I I walked out the door into a suburban neighborhood, trying to figure this conundrum out. The sky was overcast and gray, a constant threat of some sort of foulness to rain from the heavens. The wind was strong, blowing various trash and debris from the street. I could see black smoke on the horizon, rising up to coalesce with the dark clouds. Step by step, I moved the desiccated feeling body I was in down the driveway. I didn't see a single person, just the signs of exodus. Front doors were broken down or left open, windows smashed, burnouts from tires throughout the street, and the strange feeling of not being alone. I could sense someone was around. I could hear their heartbeat. I could feel the warmth. I needed to find them. I needed to know what was going on. Someone would help me. I was sure. A too thick saliva began to form in my mouth, a very foreign saliva. I spit a purple slime tinge with red hitting the ground along with something white. The purging of a toxin? So I began to walk. I made horrible progress, walking down the street on a pair of dead legs. I didn't mind it though. I was lost in a sort of mindlessness, not uncontent to just be wandering. The whole time the possibility of other people probed my brain, insisting that I find them. Walking down the street through the internal maze of neighborhood, I came across a dog, a big Doberman. At first he caught my attention in an interested way. I looked at him, enthralled, but then he caught a glimpse of me and started barking. The barking became louder and louder, and I began to grow irritated. The way the dog stared at me, fangs bared, or bared, I don't know, caused my reservedness to subside. I could feel the fury cauterizing my body, crawling up my spine, making my hands shake. This animal was challenging me, my prey. I strode over to him, oblivious to the deep growling. The dog readied himself to pounce, and the thought of this pathetic thing posing a challenge was amusing. He jumped forward, biting to my calf, hard enough to cause a crunch to sound. But I was so full of rage, so full of hatred, that my whole body was numb. I threw myself upon the dog, wrapping my hands around his neck tightly. I slowly began twisting my iron grip with as much power as I could muster, and nothing in the world would stop me from breaking his neck. He managed to whimper in such a saddening manner that if I could feel sorrow, it would have hurt me inside. So I made it excruciating for the dog, finally breaking his neck after his head was twisted at 180 degrees. Then I picked his corpse up, slammed it into the street, and started punching his ribcage, grinding his flesh and innards against the cement with my fists, until just the head and hind legs remained intact, connected together by a spine and fur matted with dog's bloody remains. When I was done, I asked myself what I'd just done. I now felt nothing. I was calm. I was collected. My mind analyzed the situation and it deduced my anger as a fair reaction. Though I had a subconscious feeling that what I had done was just sickeningly wrong. What if I had brain damage? I had heard a story of how a man had brain damage in a specific area, which caused him to fly into a blind fury at the smallest slight. What if it happened to me? Enough oxygen deprivation could cause both brain damage and unconsciousness. Was I even mentally fit to be a human being anymore? I need to find somebody quickly. I continued on, eventually reaching the end of the neighborhood. Two cars were crashed into each other, and I walked up to them. One was empty, while the driver of the other car was resting his head on the steering wheel. I walked over, opened the door, and lifting his head up by the hair. His forehead was caved in. Pieces of skull broken off in his brain. He didn't smell particularly good, so I picked him up and threw him into the street. I sat in the car looking at it. I was sure I'd driven cars many times before, but as I sat in that seat, I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. I grabbed the wheel, turned it. Nothing happened. There were a ton of buttons next to the wheel, and I began pressing them. One of them made a terrible noise come on, and after forgetting which one it was, I left. I was on Main Street. There were cars parked in the lots out front of the derelict shopping centers. The occasional sign of violence streaked upon the pavement, or wall in a bloody fashion. The lights of miscellaneous shops were still on, though I could see no one inside. Automated traffic lights went through their cycles, unaware that they did nothing to show the people who weren't there. The place was a ghost town, void of anything that might be alive. Then I saw someone. I was in front of a grocery store, the entrance destroyed by a flipped car. The person I saw appeared to be a man. He limped, and it seemed like every time he put weight on his right leg, it would almost snap out underneath him. He was making his way into the apartment complex from the other side of the street. I tried yelling out to him, but all I could make was a groan. He continued onto the complex ground, and I decided to follow him. When I passed the surrounding fence, however, I saw a group of people running up a flight of stairs to an apartment. One of them was holding a gun towards the man trying to follow, who seemed to beseech something off of them by holding his arms out. From the look of it, he needed medical aid, and then they shot him. I immediately took cover behind the fence, peeking around the corner. The last person to go in was a woman, who made the strangest feeling rise in my chest. I took a look at her as she stared at the corpse of the man her friend had just shot. She couldn't see me, however, and I went inside. There was something peculiar about her. She contorted my chapped lips into a goofy semi-grin. I had a feeling like I knew her, like I needed to know her again. Perhaps she could help me sort this whole mess out. Maybe I could find out who I once was. But I wasn't going to be able to approach them if they were just shooting random people. I made my way towards the grocery store. My muscles began to grow flexible, and I could move a bit more smoothly now. Though the calf the dog had bitten wasn't as strong as my uninjured one. I began to hope that whatever chemicals was in my system was starting to wear off. That there might not be permanent effects after all. I walked through the parking lot. The place was abandoned, though it didn't seem voluntary. Some of the car doors were open, some were painted red. One trunk was open, half filled with groceries, and a carton of eggs smashed upon the concrete next to it. Dozens of cars were left astray. The car that had rolled over had smashed the glass doors leading into the grocery store. It appeared that the car was resting upon a few people, their blood and organs forced out of their bodies all over the cement. The wind blew. It was cold. I got to the dumpster behind the store and opened it up. I grabbed a piece of cardboard, and underneath it was a small child, face gnawed until it was unrecognizable. I could see the bone of the nose, though the cartilage was gone. There was an ear spat up next to his head. The lips were eating in a particularly vicious way, exposing smashed-in teeth and purple gums. The eyes had been slurped out, leaving this 8-year-old child staring to the sky with a lifeless gaze. The skull was smashed in, and the brain was served at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The body had pieces picked off it in varying degrees. In some places to the muscle, in others to the bone. This was the work of something wild, something extremely voracious. The child was small enough to be an easy meal for a pack of starving dogs. There was even a news report about cases like this a few months ago. Wasn't there? Or did it seem like something that would be on the news? Regardless, I reached my hand into this empty stomach, digging up the past remains in search of wet blood. After getting some, I wrote, "I'm not an enemy, don't attack," on the cardboard. The body gave off a foul stench. It wasn't the sight so much as it was the scent that deterred me. It wasn't decomposition, but there was something definitely wrong with the corpse. So I left, utterly forgetting the small child. I arrived back at the opening of the apartment complex. The door the group had entered was shut tight. I waited, not sure how long it was, but completely content with passing the time doing nothing. Then I thought it would be better to see them coming before they could see me. So I took my sign and went to the cemetery across the street from the apartments, where I would be able to properly observe them.